Okay, so out here on my local trail today, this trail is just behind my house. There's a dogwood tree along this trail, which I really love. It's my favorite tree. And I've been trying to get a picture of a dogwood for 20 years, and I just have never really been successful. So I'm giving it a shot today. I'm using the Canon 5D Mark IV here with the 70-200 f4 lens, which is a very good lens just for all-around photography, but very good for close-up photography as well. It focuses very close, and because it's got a zoom, it's way more flexible than, say, a fixed focal length macro lens. So I'm sort of focused in on a little branch here with some dogwood flowers on the branch, and the thing I'm trying to do is isolate one of the flowers and then send all of the others into kind of an out of focus or blurry feel, just to give the shot a little bit more of an ethereal, kind of artistic, non-representative, non-documentary type of feel. And I think that's very important in landscape photography to do that, is to try to take the subject out of it a little bit and impose some art or some interpretation or some meaning onto the thing itself. So often f22, f16, it's too much. I'm shooting at f4 here to try to isolate the flower so that I get sort of a dreamy feel in the background, which might impart a little bit of meaning or mystery into the image. So I'll take a few shots here and then I'll show you what I've got. Just a little hack here. It's raining a little bit, and when it's raining a little bit, it's not raining heavily, what I often will do is put a towel over my camera and over my lens, and that's good enough. That keeps the water off the camera. It soaks up a little bit of the water that's on the camera already from the rain as well, and I find it's a little bit better than something plastic, which kind of traps the moisture in, causes fogging of the lens and so on. So that's a useful little hack that I use that you may find useful for your own photography. Okay, so what I've been doing is taking a number of different images of this tree and experimenting a little bit. It's very important to do that. And you know, once I got the images that I really are in my style and I really like, you know, what I have done is just experimented a little bit, tried different shots, and just maybe perhaps find something a little unusual or a little out of the ordinary that I maybe wouldn't normally shoot. And so I find a good way to do that is just handheld. Just walk around the camera with the camera handheld, shoot some images, and then maybe something will appeal to you. And once you find something that appeals, then you know, set the camera up on the tripod and do a good job. But I've been walking around taking a number of handheld images of the tree, and this is what I found. That's the area of the tree that I'm looking at. It's beautifully lit, and I'm doing some high key photographs of that now. So. Okay, so this is what I found along my local trail here, just a bit farther down from the dogwood. And it's this very small area, but it's really an interesting area of spring flowers and lilies and so on. So even though the patch of plants is really quite small, you could spend a lot of time in here working on macro type images. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend some time here and see if I can't find a nice macro. Okay, so I've been looking around here for quite some time, and I just really haven't found anything that appeals. Now, when that happens, if you really want to make an image, I think you have to kind of switch away from a kind of an objective, compositional type of mode into a more interpretive and artistic mode. And I learned to do this actually in a style of wedding photography that I used to do. I used to do sort of photojournalistic, kind of high art style wedding photography where the images were very interpretive. And it was all about the meaning that the image conveyed rather than the subject of the image itself. So when the subject is not really, you just can't find a subject that works compositionally, I've got a little trick for you about how to find images and how to create something that's aesthetic and beautiful and artistic. So the first thing, I've got a macro lens on here, and I'm going to get up close, because if the large subject is not working, you're going to have to get up close to the subject. Second thing is I've got my ISO up very high, so it's at 800. Don't worry about that. A modern camera at 800 ISO is no problem at all. You can easily go to 1600. This is a Canon 5D Mark IV. It'll work pretty well at 1600, but the newer sensors are just fine at 1600 ISO. Certainly in light like this, which is cloudy and there's some cover here from the tree. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I'm down around f4, f5, something like that. I want to throw a lot of the image out of focus, and I may even go down to f2.8. Now the thing to do here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera in towards a particular subject that I think is interesting. And I'm not going to look through the viewfinder. That's the real trick. When you look through the viewfinder, logic happens. You start thinking. And when you're trying to create something artistic and interpretive and meaningful, in some sense subconscious, you don't want to think. So you want to be reactive to the subject. And very often I find when you look through the viewfinder, you start thinking and the image becomes too constructed, too logical, too thoughtful. So I'm just going to move the camera around here, and I'm just going to use the autofocus and focus and take an image and kind of look at what I get. And then based upon what I've got, then reassess the image, move the camera around, frame the subject a little differently. Now here is a very important idea. We've got some flowers in the foreground here. I forget the name of these. I'll put them up on the image. But I'm going to try and shoot through these towards this subject here. So what I want to do is to try to focus on that. So that's done nicely. So focus on that. And then shoot through these flowers to this one in the background. And just don't even look. And you'll get really very good at this. And what that will do is this will go all out of focus, it'll go blurry and pink, and then the subject will be in focus if you've managed to focus correctly, and it will look really interesting. So I'm going to try that for a little while, and then I'm going to show you some of the images that I got doing that.
Some say love is a winding road, carves a map through the darkest night. Some say love takes a heavy load, helps someone make the burden light, teaches you not to hold too tight. You and I have come a long way together. You and I got a long way to go. You don't have to ask me now and never, 'cause I'm already yours and you'll always be mine.
Okay, so I've spent a fair bit of time moving around here and photographing with the macro lens, exactly in the way that I was describing, handheld, high ISO, low f-stop, trying to find something that works and then focusing in on that. Now, as you can maybe see, the light today is really, really flat, although it tends not to be flat when you get in close to subjects. In fact, I think some of the images you'll see, they're quite dynamic, there's a lot of dynamic range. So they're not as flat if you get in close, but something that you can do, and I know other people have talked about this, something you can do is actually just go out and get a little light disc like this or a little reflector. I always have this in my pack, and they're extremely light, and you just unzip and they pop out like that. And one side is gold and then the other side is flat, and you can use them to reflect light into a subject, or you can use them to scrim or block a little bit of light on the subject. So what I'll often do is take this out and then put it right as low as I can get it underneath the subject that I'm photographing to bounce light back into the subject from the underneath, because of course in a situation like this all the light is coming from the top, and it's amazing the difference that can make sometimes. Now if you don't have something like this, you know, maybe you've got a white cloth you can use or something like that you can use to reflect light in, but I would strongly recommend getting something like this. Okay, so I've decided on an image here. It's really taken me a long time. I've been looking for about an hour. The problem is when you have a little bit of rain like this, you get a tremendous amount of glare on the sort of leathery leaves. And the glare is it's just too much. It's overwhelming in many cases. And so you have to find a position for the camera that reduces glare, but you also have a nice composition. And so it's been a real challenge. So I'll show you the image. I can't show it to you on the back of the camera because there's so much glare on the back of the camera you can't actually see it. But I'll show you the image if I come up with a good one. I also took an image here about a week ago when it wasn't raining, and I'll show you that image as well because that one actually worked out quite well, and I took it in the same spot.
Okay, so here's the image. This image was made in a very similar location to an image I made a week ago, and I'll show you that image as a comparison because in that situation it wasn't raining at all. The leaves and the foliage were dry. Here you can see with the wet leaves on the leathery false lily of the valley, there's a tremendous amount of glare, and for me that's too much. It's distracting. I actually find it difficult to see the subject for all of the glare that there is there. But something quite interesting about this is that on the bleeding heart, you can see that there's no glare on these leaves, and in fact the water droplets look really kind of interesting on the bleeding heart leaves. And so that's just kind of a matter of knowing your subject and understanding that in some conditions one subject maybe doesn't work, but another subject does work. And so I just put that in my memory banks and I remember. So let's just take a look now at the image I made almost in exactly the same place a week ago. Okay, so here's the image, and you can see how completely different the image looks when it's dry than when it's raining. Now it is in a slightly different position, but not that much. So the quality of the light and the quality of the conditions make an absolutely massive difference to an image. And I think that's what we're doing in landscape photography a lot, is to try to find the situation in which the particular subject that we have looks right or looks the best or looks in a way that kind of matches what we want in our image. Now, just in terms of this image itself, I really like this image because it's layered and it's textured and it keeps you looking. There's a complexity to the image, even though the subject is quite small. Now, you can see here that the lily of the valley has a nice composition. It works throughout the image, so it leads the eye throughout the image. You can also see that the bleeding heart does the same. The bleeding heart kind of leads through the image. So we have sort of two types of leaf, two types of subject, both leading through the image. We also have the bleeding heart flowers as well that are distributed in a way that I find quite pleasing in the image. You know, it's not like they're lined up or they're in one particular clump somewhere, but they're distributed in a way that leads the eye throughout the entire image. So we've got kind of that complexity of the different types of leaves and flowers leading the eye through the image. We've also got color complexity as well. So if you just look at some of the bleeding heart leaves, they're quite dark green and then others are yellow. And it's not that there's kind of a clump of yellow in one area of the image, but none elsewhere. The yellow kind of leads through the image as well. And so we've got sort of a great deal of complexity here in texture and color and in subject. And all of them are working their way through the image in a pleasing way. And so, you know, the question is, what am I looking for when I'm trying to compose an image? That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a complexity that can be made simple by the way in which the subject or the color or the texture works its way through an image. And I searched a long time for this in that section. And from my point of view, it's successful. It works. It has enough complexity to keep you engaged, yet it strikes me as an easy and simple and cohesive image to look at. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's going to be the video for this week. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching these videos. My first video was quite successful. I really have no idea why, but thank you so much for all of the sort of really supportive and positive comments that I got. I really appreciated it a great deal. So I hope you enjoy this video. You found something useful and interesting. And we'll see you all in the next video.
You and I got a long way to go. Oh, You don't have to ask me now or never, 'cause I'm already